Hi everyone, I'm JLai, your guide for today's economics lesson. Welcome back. Today we're looking at one of the biggest divides in macroeconomics, the Keynesian model versus the monetarist or new classical model. We'll talk about their different assumptions, what those assumptions mean for how the economy behaves, and what they imply for government policy. As we go, I'll refer directly to the graphs on screen, so keep figure A and figure B in view. Let's start with the first major contrast: automatic self-correction versus gaps that can last a very long time. Look at figure A. This is the monetarist and new classical picture. If the economy slips into an inflationary gap or a deflationary gap, it corrects itself. As long as resource prices, especially wages, are free to change when the price level changes, the economy automatically returns to potential output, marked YP on the horizontal axis. Markets do the work. In the long run, you are back on that vertical long run aggregate supply line at YP. The Keynesian story is very different. One of the most important ideas from Keynes is that a deflationary gap, a recessionary gap, where output is below potential, can persist for long periods. Why? Partly because wages and prices do not fall easily, they're sticky, and partly because aggregate demand is simply too low. Consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports together are not buying enough output. Firms do not find it worthwhile to produce at potential. Now look at figure B. This is the Keynesian aggregate supply curve, flat at first, then rising near full employment, then vertical. When aggregate demand is weak, it intersects the horizontal section. Equilibrium real GDP settles at a point like Y1 or Y2, below potential output. YP, call that less than full employment equilibrium YE if you like, and it can stay there indefinitely. There is no automatic slide back to full employment. Make sure you remember that Keynesian analysis is essentially short term analysis. That does not mean Keynesian economists ignore the long run. It means they do not accept the idea that the economy automatically reaches the fully flexible price, full employment long run that figure A describes. This is really important because the two views point to opposite policies. According to the monetarist and new classical model in figure A, governments should try to make markets work as freely as possible. Let wages and product prices respond to demand and supply. Don't interfere. According to the Keynesian model in figure B, the government must intervene with specific measures to pull the economy off that flat stretch and toward YP. Now stay with both graphs. This is the key comparison for what happens when aggregate demand increases. Start with figure A, the monetarist and new classical model. You have a vertical long run aggregate supply curve standing at YP, potential output. Aggregate demand starts at AD1, then shifts right to AD2, then to AD3. Every intersection sits on that vertical line at YP. The only thing that changes is the price level. It rises from price level 3 to price level 2 to price level 1. Real GDP does not change. Extra demand, in the long run, only produces a higher price level. In the short run of this same tradition, an increase in aggregate demand can move you along an upward sloping short run aggregate supply curve. You get both more real GDP and a higher price level for a while. Then wages adjust, short run aggregate supply shifts, and you end up back at YP on figure A, with only inflation left over. The long run message is clear: demand cannot permanently raise real output. Now look at figure B, the Keynesian model. We have AD1, AD2, AD3, and AD4. A D1 meets the flat section at Y1. A D2 meets it further along at Y2. A D3 is still largely on, or just leaving that horizontal stretch around Y3. Real GDP is rising, Y1 to Y2 to Y3, but the price level is not. Spare capacity means firms can produce more without bidding up prices. Only as we approach YP, potential output, does the curve bend up. A D4 hits that rising, then vertical section. Now extra demand starts to raise the price level as well. Once you are on the vertical part, more demand means rapid price increases and no extra real GDP. The key point here is this: in the Keynesian view, shown in figure B, increases in aggregate demand need not result in a higher price level, not while the economy is on that horizontal stretch. In the monetarist and new classical view, shown in figure A, they always do. That difference changes policy again. Rapid inflation is undesirable. So, in the monetarist and new classical view, because extra demand always feeds into the price level, as you see from price level 3 up to price level 1 at the same YP, policy should focus on long run growth. Shift the long run aggregate supply curve to the right, raise potential output without causing inflation. By contrast, in the Keynesian view, when the economy is in a deflationary gap at Y1 or Y2 on the flat part of figure B, boosting aggregate demand is not only harmless, it is essential. You move from Y1 toward YP without immediately paying an inflation cost. Demand side policy is used both to prevent gaps and to close them. Let's step back. These two perspectives are not just classroom models. They rest on very different pictures of the economic world, and they lead to very different advice. The monetarist and new classical perspective sees the economy as a stable system. It automatically tends toward long run equilibrium at YP, full employment at the natural rate of unemployment. Short term fluctuations correct themselves. There is no need for government to fix the business cycle. Instead, government should keep markets competitive so prices can rise or fall as needed. Many in this camp argue that if governments try to correct short term swings, they may make those swings larger. Some believe real world cycles are as big as they are because of intervention. And for long run growth, extra aggregate demand cannot raise real GDP. Figure A shows why. It only raises the price level, so concentrate on the supply side. The Keynesian perspective sees the economy as unstable. Repeating short term fluctuations do not correct themselves. They come mainly from swings in aggregate demand, often from investment, which depends on firms' expectations about the future. Optimism raises investment and shifts aggregate demand right, like the move from AD1 toward AD4 in Figure B. Pessimism does the opposite. Keynes called those waves of optimism and pessimism animal spirits. When there is a deflationary gap, many factors stop market forces from working smoothly. Wages and prices do not fall easily, even over long periods. The economy can remain at Y1 or Y2, so government has an important role: raise aggregate demand in a slump and restrain it in a boom. Most economists today are not purely one school or the other. After decades of debate, many would say both demand side and supply side policies have a place. Even so, people still lean one way. Why hasn't the disagreement been settled? A well known economist, Mark Bloch, argued that there has been an unending series of attempts to produce a decisive empirical test and that evidence has not made economists change their minds. The controversy survives because of deep, hardcore disagreements about how well the private sector can adjust on its own and whether government policy is stabilizing or destabilizing. Robert Solow, a Nobel Prize winning economist, put it even more directly: social scientists have interests, ideologies, and values. Unlike research on the strength of materials or the structure of a molecule, economics sits very close to those values. The problems an economist chooses, the questions they ask or don't ask, the framework they use, and even the words they pick can reflect those beliefs. So when you hear a fierce argument about stimulus versus staying out of the way, you are not only hearing two models, you are often hearing two sets of values about markets and government. Figure A versus Figure B is also a clash of worldviews. Let's recap the essentials with the graphs in mind. First, the monetarist and new classical model in Figure A says gaps correct themselves if prices are flexible, and you return to YP. The Keynesian model in Figure B says a deflationary gap can persist at a point like YE or Y1 because demand is too low and wages are sticky. Second, that leads to opposite policy advice. One side says free the markets and step back. The other says government must act to move the economy off the flat section toward YP. Third, look at the two figures together. Extra aggregate demand always raises the price level in Figure A. In Figure B, it need not while you are traveling from Y1 to Y2 to Y3 on the horizontal stretch. Fourth, so one camp focuses on shifting long run aggregate supply to grow without inflation. The other uses demand management to close gaps while spare capacity still exists. Fifth, the debate lasts not only because the diagrams differ, but because deeper beliefs about the self adjusting power of markets and about the proper role of government shape how economists read the evidence. That's the heart of today's topic. Two graphs, two maps of the same economy, and two very different ideas about what we should do next. Keep figure A and figure B in front of you. Keep thinking, and I'll see you in the next lesson.